It was a Tuesday in October. House on Larkspur Court, empty for 3 years according to the file on my clipboard. Bank owned, no utilities, no reason for anyone to be inside. I was standing in the driveway taking my required exterior condition photos when I looked up at the second floor window and saw words written in the fog on the inside of the glass. Not outside fog. Inside fog. Like someone's breath had been on that glass recently enough to still be wet. The words said, "He counts the houses too." I stood there for maybe 10 seconds just staring at it. Then I zoomed in with my phone camera to get a photo for my report, and by the time the shutter clicked, the fog was already fading. In the photo, you can barely make out the shape of letters. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes first, I'd think it was nothing. Condensation. A trick of the light. I didn't go inside that house that day. I told myself the job wasn't worth it, wrote "unable to access, appears secure" on my form, and drove away faster than I probably needed to. That was the first weird thing. It was not the last. My name's Chris. I'm 27, and at the time all this happened, I was about 4 months into a job I'd honestly never heard of before I needed it. After I got laid off from the distribution warehouse in the spring, I was doing whatever gig work I could string together: grocery delivery, some furniture assembly gigs through an app, stuff like that. My girlfriend Steph found the job posting for me. A property management company that handles foreclosed and bank-owned homes needed field inspectors to drive around and check on vacant properties. Basically, banks own thousands of empty houses all over the country while they're in foreclosure limbo, and somebody has to make sure nobody's squatting in them, the pipes haven't burst, the grass is getting cut, all that. You show up, take photos of the outside, check the doors and windows are locked, note anything unusual, upload it to an app, get paid per house. It paid better than delivery, and I could set my own hours, so I said yes. The area I got assigned was a subdivision outside Columbus called Fair Hollow Estates. It's one of those developments that got built right before the 2008 crash and never really recovered. Big houses, wide streets, but maybe a third of them empty at any given time depending on the market. Foreclosures cycle through. Families move in, families move out, banks repossess, houses sit for a year or two, somebody flips it, repeat. By the time I started, I had a rotating list of about 40 properties I'd cycle through every 2 weeks. They paired me with a guy named Danny Osei for my first week to show me the ropes. Danny was maybe 35, had been doing this job for almost 3 years, longer than anyone else on the local team. He drove a beat-up Corolla with a coffee thermos duct-taped into the cup holder because the cup holder itself had broken off. He was funny in a low-key way, the kind of guy who narrates everything he's doing under his breath. Okay, checking the garage door. Garage door is closed. Shocking absolutely nobody. Danny's whole approach to the job was, don't overthink it, don't go inside unless you have to, and don't let the houses get in your head. He told me on my first day, half joking, these places mess with you if you let them. You start seeing a house sit empty for 2 years, and your brain wants there to be a story. There isn't a story. It's just a house nobody wants right now. I believed him. For a few months, he was right. The actual work was boring in the way most jobs are boring. Drive to an address, walk the perimeter, photograph the front door, back door, any broken windows, the state of the yard, check that the lockbox on the door still has the key in it, note if mail is piling up, if there's graffiti, if raccoons have gotten into the garage again. Upload it all through an app called Field Check that timestamps and geotags every photo. Get paid $18 per property, more if it needs a full walkthrough. Fair Hollow was quiet. It's the kind of neighborhood where half the houses look identical, same builder, same 3 floor plans repeated over and over, different colored shutters, cul-de-sacs that curve back into each other so you can drive in circles if you're not paying attention to street signs. A lot of the empty houses still had furniture in them because banks sometimes don't clear everything out right away, especially if there's a dispute over the foreclosure. So you'd walk into a totally empty house except for like a kid's bunk bed frame still standing in an upstairs room, or a couch nobody wanted to move. I liked the job more than I expected to. There was something almost meditative about it. Just me, my clipboard, 40 empty houses, and a lot of quiet streets. That lasted until about the 7th week. The first thing I noticed, and I want to stress that at the time it seemed completely explainable, was a porch light. House on Thistlewood Lane. Empty 18 months, utilities disconnected according to my file, meaning there should be zero electricity running to that house at all. I pulled up around 4 p.m., still light out, and didn't think anything of it. Did my walkthrough, photographed everything, left. 2 weeks later, I came back for the routine recheck. Same house. This time, it was closer to 6:30 p.m., starting to get dark, and the porch light was on. I remember standing in the driveway just kind of staring at it, doing the math in my head. Disconnected utilities, no power, light bulb glowing. I actually laughed a little, because my brain immediately went to ghost, and then immediately corrected itself, because that's stupid. More likely explanation: solar-powered porch light, the kind you can buy at any hardware store. Previous owner installed it. Battery still had a charge. I wrote a note in my report, porch light active, verify utility status, and moved on. Made sense. Didn't think about it again for a while. The second thing was footprints, and this one I noticed on a house on Larkspur, same street as the fog window. Different house. A few weeks before that happened, it had rained the night before, so the mud in front of the garage was soft. There were footprints leading from the sidewalk up to the front door. Just one set, adult-sized, sneakers by the tread pattern. Here's the thing that bugged me. The footprints stopped at the door. Not went inside. Not turned around and walked away. Stopped. Like whoever made them had just stood there and then vanished. Or the ground itself had swallowed the next step. Obviously, the real explanation is that the person walked onto the concrete porch, which doesn't hold footprints, and then either went inside or walked back, exactly retracing their own steps closely enough that it blended together in soft mud. I told myself that. I photographed it for the report anyway, because it felt like the kind of thing I should document, and moved on to the next house on my list. Third thing. A couple weeks after that, I was inside a house on Birchcrest, doing a full interior walkthrough. This was one where the bank wanted confirmation nobody was squatting, and the house's alarm system, which per my paperwork had been deactivated for over a year, started beeping. Not blaring, just that soft, rhythmic beep you get when a door sensor detects something open. I checked every door and window. All closed, all locked. The panel by the front door had no display lit up, no power light, nothing. It just kept beeping every 4 or 5 seconds from somewhere inside the wall, like a smoke detector with a dying battery, except there was no logical reason for it to have any power source at all. I left that report a little vague. Wrote, possible residual alarm activity, recommend electrical inspection, and didn't mention that I stood in that hallway for a solid 2 minutes with my heart going, trying to convince myself it was just a smoke detector. Fourth thing. This one I actually asked Danny about, because it happened on a house he'd also been checking. A doll. One of those old, hard plastic dolls, sitting on the windowsill of an upstairs bedroom in a house on Cardigan Way, visible from the street if you looked up. I noticed it on a Monday. Came back the following Monday for the recheck, and the doll had moved same windowsill but now facing the opposite direction, looking out at the street instead of into the room. I texted Danny a photo. He wrote back, "Lol, yeah, I've seen that thing. Probably the wind knocks it around, or a bank rep walked through and bumped it. Don't spiral, man." I didn't spiral. Not yet. Each of these things had a reasonable explanation sitting right next to it, close enough to grab onto. Solar light, retraced footsteps, old batteries, wind. That's the thing about small weird stuff, it's never enough on its own to make you do anything different. You just kind of file it away and keep working. Fifth thing, and this is the one that actually started to get under my skin, radio interference. Not on an actual radio on my phone. I'd be sitting in my car between houses, scrolling through my field check app to see my next address, and my phone speaker would start putting out this low static hum, almost like a badly tuned AM station, even though nothing was playing. It happened 3 separate times over about a month, always parked outside a vacant house, never anywhere else. I mentioned it to Steph, and she just said my phone was probably dying and I should get a new battery. I got the battery replaced. It kept happening. None of these things, on their own, meant anything. That's what I kept telling myself. Old houses do old house things. Empty neighborhoods are quiet enough that your imagination fills in gaps. I was, by my own admission, a guy whose entire job was walking through empty houses alone, which is exactly the kind of job that will eventually make you jumpy whether anything's actually wrong or not. But they were adding up, slowly, like a pile of receipts you don't look at until you realize how much you've actually spent. Around week 9, Danny started acting different. It was small at first. He stopped narrating things out loud when we happened to overlap on a street. He started double-checking his car locks before we'd even finished a walkthrough, standing by the door with his keys already out. One time I asked him if he wanted to grab lunch after we finished the Fair Hollow Loop, and he said no. Kind of sharp, like I'd asked something inappropriate. Then one afternoon in early November, he called me. Not texted called, which Danny never did. "Hey, quick question," he said. And I could tell right away something was off in his voice. Too even, like he was working hard to sound casual. "You ever go inside the Larkspur house? The one at the end, 4471? That was the fog window house." I told him no. I'd skipped the interior on that one. Put "unable to access" on the report. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, good. Don't." I asked him why. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "I went in last week. Full walkthrough. Bank wanted photos of water damage in the basement. And this is gonna sound insane, but there's food in that fridge. Not old food. Fresh stuff. Milk that wasn't expired. And the mail on the counter wasn't addressed to the previous owners. It was addressed to current resident. Which, fine. That's normal for vacant houses. Catalogs and stuff still come. But there was also a handwritten note stuck to it. Just said, "Stop looking." I asked him what he did. "I left," he said. "Obviously. And I called it into the office, told them the house needs a police welfare check because somebody might be squatting, and they said they'd file it, and I don't know if they ever did, because 2 days later, I drove past just to see if there was a patrol car or anything, and the note was gone. Not just off the counter gone, like it never existed. Even the milk in the fridge was gone. Whole fridge was empty, like it's supposed to be. I asked him if he thought someone was living there. "I think somebody's living in more than one of them," he said. "I think whoever it is moves around, and I think they know which houses we're checking, because I've started noticing stuff cleaned up right before my visits, like they know the schedule." That last part sat wrong with me for days, because our schedule wasn't public. It was generated inside the Field Check app, randomized within a 2-week window so property owners couldn't predict inspection timing and hide problems. If someone knew our schedule, they either had access to the app, or they were watching us closely enough to predict our patterns anyway. Danny quit 11 days later. No notice, no big announcement, just texted the team group chat, "Not doing this anymore, sorry," and never picked up his phone again. I called him probably 6 times over the next month. Voicemail, every time, and eventually the voicemail box was full. Steph looked him up for me on Facebook, and his profile picture had been the same for over a year. No new posts. Not dead. I checked around indirectly through mutual contacts on the crew. Someone confirmed he'd moved back in with his sister in Cincinnati, just gone from this entirely. I should have quit too. I think about that a lot. But the money was decent, and I told myself Danny had just spooked himself, the way people do when a job puts them alone in empty houses too many times in a row. I told myself I was more level-headed than that. Then I found the fog window myself, on the same house Danny had described. He counts the houses too. After that, I couldn't tell myself it was nothing anymore. But I also couldn't afford to quit, not with rent due and Steph's hours getting cut at her job. So I kept going. I just started being more careful. I started parking so I could see my car from wherever I was standing. I started doing exteriors only whenever I could get away with it on my reports. And I started paying attention in a way I hadn't before, really looking at these houses instead of just checking boxes, which is how, 3 weeks after the fog window, I found the room. It was a different house. 4471 Larkspur had gone quiet after the fog window incident. I did 2 more exterior-only checks, and nothing happened. No lights, no footprints, nothing. But a new address had come onto my rotation that month. 22 Cardigan Way, same street as the dollhouse. A 2-story colonial that had been vacant for almost 4 years, longer than most, because of some ongoing title dispute between the bank and a relative of the previous owner. The bank wanted a full interior inspection because they were finally close to resolving the title issue and needed documentation of the property's condition before listing it. I went in around 2 p.m. on a Thursday. Full daylight. Told myself that mattered, even though logically it shouldn't. Walked the downstairs kitchen, living room, all empty, dust on every surface, the specific stale smell that vacant houses get after a couple years. Like the air itself has gone unused. Upstairs was 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. All empty except for that bunk bed frame you sometimes find in these places. The primary bedroom had a walk-in closet, and when I opened it to photograph the interior condition like my checklist required, I noticed the back wall didn't sit quite flush. There was a gap along the baseboard, maybe an inch wide, where the drywall met the floor unevenly, like a panel that had been cut and reinstalled instead of being original construction. I want to be honest that I almost didn't push on it. Every instinct I had was telling me to close the closet door and write "no anomalies noted" and get back in my car. But there was a part of me that needed to know. After everything with Danny, after the fog window, after months of things not adding up, I pushed the panel. It swung inward on a hinge somebody had installed themselves, not professionally, and behind it was a crawl space that had been converted into something else. Somebody had laid plywood flooring over the joists. There was a sleeping bag, folded neatly, a battery-powered lantern, and a stack of spiral notebooks, maybe 15 of them, held together with a rubber band. I only read 1 page before I heard something downstairs, a door, I think, though I never confirmed which one, and my body made the decision to leave before my brain caught up. But that 1 page is burned into me. It was a list. Addresses. Half the houses on my rotation were on it, including ones I hadn't been assigned yet, in handwriting that had clearly been added to over a long period of time. Different pens, different pressure. Next to several addresses were notes like, "empty until March," or "inspector comes Tuesdays," or, next to 4471 Larkspur, just the word, "warned." I didn't take the notebooks. I know, looking back, that was probably a mistake, that they'd be evidence, that I should have grabbed at least one. But my hands were shaking, and every part of me just wanted out of that closet, out of that house, out of that entire subdivision. I never found out for certain who it was. I have a theory, and it's just a theory, that it's the relative involved in the title dispute, someone who felt that house, or houses in general in that neighborhood, still belonged to them, and who'd been living off-grid between multiple vacant properties for years, moving before each scheduled inspection, watching the rotation closely enough to know our patterns, someone who didn't want to be found, and who was willing to make sure of that. I don't know if that's true. I only know what I saw. I didn't finish the walkthrough. I went straight downstairs, and that's when I found the front door was closed. I want to be clear, I definitely left it open. It's standard procedure. You prop the door so you're not fumbling with a lockbox key on your way out, and I remember doing it, because I always do it. It was shut, not locked. When I tried the handle, just shut, which almost felt worse, like someone had walked past it and closed it out of habit, rather than to trap me. I stood in that front hallway for maybe 15 seconds doing the math on my options. Front door, straight ahead, unknown if anyone was between me and it. Back sliding door in the kitchen, which I'd checked earlier and knew was unlocked. I went for the kitchen. Halfway there, I heard footsteps upstairs. Not running, not chasing, just walking. Steady, unhurried. The kind of pace that made it worse because it didn't sound panicked or aggressive. It sounded like someone who knew exactly where they were and wasn't worried about being interrupted. I didn't look back to check. I got to the sliding door, got it open, it stuck a little on the track. Cost me a couple of seconds, I felt very acutely, and went through the backyard, over a low chain-link fence into the next yard, and cut through 2 more backyards until I came out on a different street entirely, 1 house down from where I'd parked. I didn't walk back to my car directly. I circled the block once on foot first, staying on the far side of the street, just to make sure nobody was waiting near it. Then I got in, locked the doors, and drove straight to the Fair Hollow Estates entrance sign before I let myself stop and just breathe for a minute. I called it in to the property management office the same way Danny had told them I believed someone was actively living in 22 Cardigan and requested a welfare check. This time I also called the police non-emergency line myself and gave them the address directly, plus a rough description of the hidden room, because I didn't trust the office to follow through the way Danny's report apparently hadn't. A patrol officer did go out about 4 hours later, according to the case number they gave me. I asked to see the report a few days after. It said the officer found the house secure, no signs of forced entry or occupancy, no mention of a closet panel, no mention of a crawl space. I called back and specifically asked if they'd checked the primary bedroom closet, and the woman on the phone put me on hold for a while and came back saying the responding officer's notes didn't specify room-by-room detail, but the property was assessed and found to be vacant per standard protocol. I asked if I could come down and show them exactly where the panel was. She said if I had further information, I should submit it in writing, and that they'd add it to the file. I never went back to 22 Cardigan Way. I quit the field check job 3 days later, the same way Danny had. No notice, just a text. Nobody from the company asked why. I got the sense, honestly, that this wasn't the first time someone had quit that route abruptly, and that they'd simply reassign it and move on the way they always did. That was 14 months ago now. I never heard anything more about 22 Cardigan Way. I looked it up online a few times over the following year. It's back on the market now, actually. Sold last spring to a young couple, according to the listing photos I found. Renovated kitchen, new flooring throughout. I have no idea if whoever renovated it found that panel in the closet, or if they simply drywalled right over it without ever knowing it was there. I think about that more than I'd like to. I never got another call from Danny. I texted him once, months after I quit, just to say I understood now, that I'd seen it too. He never responded. I don't blame him. Steph and I moved to a different part of the city not long after all this. Into an apartment, nothing to do with vacant houses at all, and I took a warehouse job again even though the pay is worse, because I needed something that didn't involve empty houses and quiet streets and the particular kind of silence you only notice in a place that used to have people living in it. Here's the part 1 haven't told anyone except Steph, and the reason I'm posting this now instead of just letting it sit. About 2 months ago, driving home from my new job, completely unrelated route, nowhere near Fair Hollow Estates, I passed a house with a for sale sign that had gone crooked in its yard. Obviously vacant a while, based on the overgrown lawn. Nothing special about it. I wasn't even really looking at it, just glanced over at a red light. Doesn't sound like much. Solar lights exist. Old batteries hold a charge sometimes. I told myself all the same things I told myself the first time, all those months ago on Thistlewood Lane. But I also know, now, in a way I didn't before all this happened, that some houses that look empty aren't, that somebody out there might be keeping a list, and that whoever wrote, "He counts the houses too," on that window wasn't necessarily warning me about themselves. I never did find out who he was supposed to be. I didn't stick around to find out this time either. Light turned green, and I drove straight home.